Listen to our exciting new plans for Galloways.
I'm Nicola Hanna. So I'm head of the income generation, so the fundraising and the communications here at Galloway's. And my colleague Rachel, who I'm sure a lot of you will know, who heads up all of our wonderful services, is with me. So we're going to do a bit of a duo. Yeah, French and Saunders, maybe. I don't know.
What's French and which one?
Well, I think we'll work that out. But anyway, we want to give you an overview, really, of the work we've been doing on the new Galloways, I suppose. It's been 12 months nearly now since we started that work. And the reason we decided we needed to think about it was actually during a meeting during lockdown, early lockdown, when we knew that the whole world was changing. We completely changed the way in which we deliver our services. So we no longer could have people coming into our buildings, for example. That had to stop. But what we were most concerned about was that we couldn't lose that support that we were giving to people, and we couldn't lose those connections. The people that we're here for, people that are living with sight loss, are our main reason for being. So we had to do something different, and so we did. We started to change our services. But after about a month of that, it was myself, Rachel, Stuart, and Hasanga, who heads up our operations and finance. And we had to make a decision. Do we carry on for the next however long this is going to be, doing what we're doing now and not really knowing what that might look like in the future? Or do we really need to sort of take a step back, do some really good work to understand what Galloway's needs to do in the future and how we need to change? And we took that decision sort of 11 months ago that we did need to think about that, and we did need to plan. And I think just to kind of jump ahead a bit, now that we're coming out of the other side of that and we're ready to start implementing those changes, a lot of other organisations that we're talking to are only just starting to agree to take that next step in thinking about what that means. So actually, us making that really brave decision 11 months ago has put us in a really good place, I think, as Galloway's, to be the right organisation for the people that we're here to support, and also to make sure that we grow as we move on as well. So kind of looking back to 11 months ago when we took that really big gulping decision, it was going to be a process, we knew that. But the most important part of that process was the research. And we called that our discovery phase. So, we're not here to make decisions about Galloway's and what Galloway's needs to be for people. The people that we're here for need to make those decisions. We need to talk to our stakeholders. And our stakeholders are varied. So yes, they're people that live with sight loss, but they're also the friends and family of people that live with sight loss. They're also the people that fund us, our donors, bigger funders, corporates, our staff group. There's a whole range of commissioners.
Yeah, commissioners and clinicians was quite a big one. And also people that we currently support who were already within our kind of support network, but quite crucially, people that didn't access our services, because we needed to understand why they didn't access our services and what types of services would have been helpful for them in their sight loss journey. So there was quite an in-depth and lots of varied conversations based on who we were consulting with at the time. And we asked varied questions, particularly those with sight loss, for people early on in their sight loss journey, so newly diagnosed people versus those that have been living with sight loss and are very experienced and confident in dealing with their sight loss. So it was a hugely varied piece of consultation that we did across a number of different people and organisations too.
Yeah, and we did that in various ways. So we held focus groups with people. We had one-to-one telephone conversations with a lot of people. And we also used our welfare calls as an opportunity to talk to people and ask them what they felt and thought as well. So we did over 800 different interactions with different stakeholders. And then what came, that went on probably about a 6-week to 2-month period of just talking to people. We had an external person, a lady called Philippa, who I don't know if any of you were involved in some of those conversations, you probably would have spoken to. And what she gave was a completely objective view of things. She listened to people. And that was really valuable, because it meant that the people that we were talking to felt safe and confident. They could talk openly and honestly about Galloway's and their own experiences. But also it just meant that there was no bias. There was nobody from Galloway's kind of thinking, oh, well, I'm hearing you, but I don't think that's right. It was completely objective. And then, so once Philippa had gathered all that information together, she went away and created the key outcomes, really. So what are the things that Galloway's need to be? What do we need to be thinking about? How do we need to change for the better? And so Philippa created a report, basically, that she brought back into Galloway's. We couldn't hide from. We had to move on from that knowledge base. Because it was what everybody had told us. We couldn't deny that this is the direction of travel. And so from that document, the SLT, so we call it SLT, Senior Leadership Team, so it's myself, Rachel, and Hasanga. We picked that document up and said, okay, what are the key themes coming out of this? What are the things that people are telling us, and how do we take that forward? And I'll be really honest, it was massive. It was really daunting.
Really hard.
It took us ages to sort of pull out what we think were the important things, and also not lose any of all that amazing information that we've been given, because actually we're in a really lucky place to have been given all of that information, because quite often organisations go away and they create a strategy that isn't kind of co-produced. It doesn't have the voice of the people that are benefiting from that organisation, and we had that. So it was actually, well, whilst it was a fantastic place to be, it also made it more difficult because there was so much information.
It was really rich. All of the information was rich, but there was some, when you really drill down to it, there was some very, very key themes that came out of it, wasn't there?
Yeah, do you want to talk about those?
Yeah. So the key themes that came out of that huge discovery piece, over 800 consultations and interviews with different people across Lancashire and Sefton, there was, people wanted some changes to accessing our services. That was a really big one. Assessment was the other one, so how they felt that kind of assessment and their interaction was with us. There was communications. There was some messaging out there of, I don't know what you do, I kind of know you, but I'm not sure what you do, and I don't really know how to get hold of you, and I don't think that's very clear, so that needed some work. So there was communications came through. Digital came through massively, digital and technology, assistive technology, and the learning and skills around that. And digital in terms of being able to access services in a digital way alongside face-to-face. Early intervention was a huge one that people felt that was absolutely critical in terms of their sight loss at that point of diagnosis. We already knew that, and obviously we're experienced in delivering at close services across the patch. But one of the biggest ones was community. So what came through very strongly through consultation was that people were, one of the main reasons why they didn't access our services for a start was that our buildings weren't best placed, and that actually what they felt we were doing was sitting in our buildings and waiting for people to come to them, for people to come to us. And actually what they wanted was a more proactive approach of us being more integrated in their community and our services being much more accessible in our community, in their community. And also acting as that kind of community connector between services that are existing in their community and how does somebody with sight loss go and access those services, but our services specifically being delivered in the community. And then there was also health and wellbeing, of us having a much more broader view on somebody's rounded, their health and wellbeing, their general health and wellbeing, and all of our services should work towards improving health and wellbeing. Do you want to talk about the next step?
Yeah, so what those are the kind of the key themes that we drew out of the research that we were given. And so then what we decided to do was that we needed to involve another wider group of people to help us work through those things. So okay, if we're talking about community, what does community mean for Galloway's and for people with sight loss? So how do we join that up with people's expectations, the delivery of our services, the staffing structure that we have at Galloway's. And so we created what we call design workshops. So we did 6 workshops
6 or 7 in the end.
over a period of 6 weeks. Each workshop was 3 days and involved a range of the staff team from across Galloway's, as well as external people coming in as well. So we had different speakers who would come in and talk about, so for example, with community, we had an organisation that works within the community and delivers community-based services. And they came to us and talked a bit about what they do and how it works, what are the pros and cons, what works, you know, what doesn't, what have been the pitfalls. So it was 3 days of working to a point where we had at least 2 ideas of something, a different way of doing things for Galloway's that would mean that we would tick that community box for people. We did it all over Zoom, and we did that in January and February, just after we went into the second lockdown. And we had planned to do it face to face because we were hoping that by then we might be, you know, seeing the back of having to do everything over Zoom, but we couldn't. We had to do it all over Zoom, which was challenging, but actually worked very, very well. And we came away after sort of 8 weeks, really. So we had all the research and we had 6 weeks of workshop information. So we had this huge bank of information, and then we had to start saying, okay, well, what does this mean? How do we create a strategy for Galloway's out of all of this information? And that was the next step, really, for myself, Rachel, and Hasanga to kind of work that through and decide what that looked like. And actually, the first sort of thing we thought about was, what does the staffing structure look like? So to deliver all these things that we want to deliver, and in the way we want to deliver it, how do we need to change the way we look in terms of our structure? That was one of the first things we did. And then we looked at what does the makeup of those teams need to be in order to deliver all these wonderful new things that we want to do. And so that took quite a bit of time, didn't it?
Yeah, it took a while, yeah. So yeah, so obviously the next step was translating, and how do we possibly deliver the services and the support identified in discovery, then worked up in our design workshops, and how do we translate that into services that we're then able to offer people that are affected by sight loss. One of the, the one thing that we haven't talked about is that although our services predominantly are those for experiencing sight loss, the other thing that came through from discovery and design was that actually we needed a greater emphasis on the friends and families of those affected by sight loss. And actually anything that we offer and anything that we consider in the future, we need to consider friends and family in doing that as well. So that was something that we also needed to incorporate in the new Galloways, if you like. There's a side of Galloway's that it's called our contract side. So we contract, so we have some services that are contracted to us by the NHS and by local authority, and that's generally our ECLO. We also deliver our low vision services. Alongside the reworking of our strategy, we've also developed a number of new contracts which added another layer of complexity for the team in terms of delivering services. So, we now deliver the rehab service over in Sefton. Jenny's on the call. She's done an unbelievable job of doing that. So we now deliver rehab services, which is a brand new service for Galloway's. We've never done that before. And our low vision services have also expanded. So that needed weaving in and working into our strategy as well. And actually the development of contracts post-COVID from the commissioners that we spoke to and the local hospital trust that we spoke to, that's certainly, there's going to be opportunities there for us to be able to support more people through some contracted services, and that'll be based on the impact of COVID. So we'll be looking into that. So one of the things that came out of discovery and design was actually the accessing services was a barrier, and so that we needed to look at that first. So the new Galloway's includes a new triage system, which will be a central access point into all services. And we'll be able to do kind of initial needs assessment through that triage service. And that person will have to have their fingers in all sorts of different pies for Galloway's. They're going to be the connector from somebody inquiring into Galloway's being connected to a member of our team, our professionally trained team, and making sure they get the support that they need. So triage and access is a new part of Galloway's, which we're looking into, and that'll be filled at a position that will go out as a vacancy within Galloway's. Obviously, community came through quite strongly, so community services plays a big part in our strategy. Community services will include sight loss advice and guidance, but again, that will be delivered out in the community. And in addition to that, we'll also be looking at some partnership work in the community, because that was a huge part, you know, a big thing that came through from discovery and design, that we needed to make that a way of, you know, of being able to really support somebody more fully will be to partner with other organisations in terms of support services. So that will be done out in the community, so that also advice and guidance. And then what we also needed to look at was what does health and wellbeing mean for somebody? So when we delved a little bit deeper into health and wellbeing, we came out with things like social wellness, so social opportunities out in the community was hugely important to people. The opportunity for physical wellness, at the moment we know that as get active, so how do we keep people physically well? Mental wellness played a huge part in somebody's health and wellbeing, so we've needed to develop services really around kind of really focusing on that our purpose is to improve people's health and wellbeing of those affected by sight loss. So we'll be looking at social wellness, physical wellness and mental wellness within our new services. But then one of the really big ones that came through was people wanted opportunities to learn new skills. And actually that came through particularly for those that were early on in their sight loss journey. I need to change the way that I live sometimes, and I need to understand what that looks like. And so people made all sorts of different varied suggestions around, you know, cooking with sight loss, for example, traveling with sight loss, you know, top 5 pieces of equipment that would help you if you've got sight loss, loads and loads of different things that people wanted to improve their learning and their skills. And that became much broader than technology, for example. It was just kind of hints and tips, ideally delivered from somebody else that experiencing sight loss, of how do we, you know, develop somebody's learning and skills. And so there'll be a more of an emphasis on our services in learning and skills. We've also assistive technology and the use of technology has gone nuts in COVID for those that access our services. And Jenny works on that team, and so does Amanda, and I think we've got Stuart on the call as well, one of our technology volunteers. And actually the demand for support with assistive technology has gone up, so there's a greater resource in that area as well in our services. Social opportunities, we'll definitely be looking at more of that in the community. So more social groups, more activities, more opportunities to meet others that are affected by sight loss as well. So there seems that we're definitely expanding our team and expanding our services, but it's generally around kind of learning and skills, social wellness, physical wellness, and then kind of information, advice and guidance. And then we've got our kind of our contracted services. One of the other areas that there was 3 other areas that were acknowledged within the discovery and design phase, and that was children, young people and family services. The other one was counselling services, and then the other one was employment. Now, unfortunately, there is only so much money in the Galloway bank. So they have been identified and certainly acknowledged in our strategy, but they are development projects for Galloway, and we'll be looking at ways of how we can fund those and how we can do that in the future. And actually, we're already working on some really strong applications to funders to have those types of services. So a huge mix of different services, taking all of that learning from discovery and design. We're going to go through a big recruitment process for doing that, and start updating our website with different ways of doing it. But at the moment, the team are working hard on planning on how do we deliver all of that as well. But the structure's definitely all in place, and the principles are all there too.
One of the biggest things that we want to do out of all of this, and the leading kind of aim of the new strategy, is getting to more people. And that's people at every stage of their sight loss journey, really, and being relevant to people. So as part of our discovery and design, we had a group of people that have worked quite closely with us. We had 2 really in-depth sessions with them about how can we work better with people who have sight loss to give them a voice in how we design our services. So it's all very well getting the discovery and the research, and then implementing that into what that might look like as a service. But in reality, what does that service need to be? How does it really look? And that's what we want to develop as we move forward. And in being one of those meetings, and we called it the Designing Together group. And one of the people that were on that call is a young lady, and she's in her 30s. And she said, one of the things that really stuck with me was that she said, unless I can't use my mobile phone or want to go on a walk, in terms of learning and skills development, there's not an awful lot else for me at Galloway's, but that's how she perceived it. And she's pregnant, and she said, I want to know about how I look after my baby with sight loss. I'm a first-time mum. I need something different from Galloway's. And I think that's when Rachel talks about how we're going to adapt our learning and skills. It's about being relevant for everybody. And also allowing people to be able to dip in and out of that resource as well. So they don't have to sit on a week-long course to learn these things, but we'll have webinars on an area on our website, for example, so you can tune into things in your own time. You might wake up at 2 a.m. and be worried about something. You can go onto our website and find that information there, and then you don't have to wait till the next day and ring us or come and see us. It's about being relevant, being there for people when they need us, and reaching more people as well. And I think what we identify within Galloway's in terms of our structure, where there's some key kind of infrastructure elements to Galloway's that maybe have lacked over the years, that we need help with. And so there's a couple of key positions that we're going to be recruiting into. One is a people manager, so probably historically called an HR manager or a personnel manager, but somebody who can really support the staff team on training and development, thinking about the health and well-being of the staff team at Galloway's as well, so that we have a happy, healthy workforce that are then able to go out and reach more people and do all of this great stuff that we're talking about. The other one is we've increased the emphasis on our volunteering. So the role now is called volunteer lead, and that position is a more senior role within Galloway's, there to build up training programs for our volunteers, create bigger opportunities, work with volunteers ultimately, and this is probably not going to be year one of our strategy, but to deliver some of those services as well, so we can really reach more people. So it's not reliant on the staff of Galloway's, but we can start to kind of slowly integrate volunteers into helping us deliver and support people with sight loss as well. The other role in terms of infrastructure is data and compliance. So our data has got bigger. The need to report on what we do, and particularly with our statutory funders, the NHS and the commissioners that we work with, and those services that we're delivering from that perspective, but also our voluntary donors as well. So it might be a trust, for example, that gives us money to do a certain thing, and they want to know what we're doing, how we get creating impact with people with sight loss. Are we changing people's lives? So that role will be pivotal in terms of how we bring all of that together, so we can go out for more money, and how we can tweak and change our services. If it's not working, it might be working for 5 people, but there's 5,000 people that need our help, and what do they want? So really drilling down into that and making sure that we understand what we're doing and the overall impact it's having. And I think Rachel touched on the assessment toolkit. So how do we know? So, when we start working with somebody with sight loss, how do we know that where they were when they started interacting with Galloway's is by the end of that journey with Galloway's, they're in a better place. And at the moment, we don't understand that. So we need to implement something so we can trace and we can monitor that as well, so we know we're doing it right. From an income gen perspective, it's been a tough year in terms of a lot of our more traditional ways of raising money. So being in the community, working with schools, with churches, with groups like the Guides, with groups like Rotary, that very much tailed off, pretty much 100%. We couldn't deliver any of our face-to-face events either. So we've had a tough year. But what we did do, and we were really successful in, is applying to trust and grants givers over that 12-month period. And that was extremely successful. But the strategy for that going forward is that we diversify our income streams, we do different things. So we work with corporates in a bigger way. We do have some corporate support, but we don't do it in a planned way. So it's about changing that. It's about understanding those people that give us money every month. What is their potential? Could they be giving us more money? What else could they do for us? So really understanding our donors and their motivations to support Galloway's. And that kind of goes back to the data role as well. They'll be able to help us identify and understand that a bit more too.
Yeah.
So we've got lots of work ahead
Well, I
of
think
us.
what we would say is, though, it's been a really tough year for Galloway's, and it's been particularly tough for our frontline staff, whether that be fundraising or services. They've really, they have worked so incredibly hard to support more people than we have ever supported. And I can tell you that it's unbelievable. I mean, just on these types of calls now, we're 450, 500 a month. We've done more than 5,000 welfare calls. Our ECLO service has doubled in the last 12 months, despite not being allowed into clinic as much. The demand for our services is huge, and actually our staff have coped unbelievably well. But it is certainly, and I get quite emotional when I think about it, because it's harrowing at times what people are going through out in the community, and they're dealing with that on a frontline basis. And I've never ever been more proud than to work in a team like I do here at Galloway's. But I really feel as though this is the turn and this is the tipping point. And although we've got some recruitment ahead of us and we've got training ahead of us, this is hugely exciting, actually, to have a digital knowledge hub that we can populate, to have community sight loss advisors out in their community, to have impact reports. That means that we can challenge statutory services. There's an unbelievable amount of opportunity there. And I feel incredibly grateful and incredibly excited to be a part of it. But it's very exciting. We're excited, aren't we?
We are, yeah. We want to continue the energy, I suppose, that we've been like a sort of a stone gathering moss, haven't we, over the past 18 months, and everything's changed, and we don't want to go back to the pre-COVID Galloways. We want to be a fresh new Galloways that's right for people. And actually, what in a kind of weird way, a perverse way, COVID gave us the opportunity to do that. It forced us to do that, and we want to keep that momentum going. That's really important for all of us. And so we're now going into what we're calling it the implementation stage. So we're agreeing the next 6 months, what does that need to look like? So that come beginning of April next year, so our financial year, the year that we plan against, runs April to March. So when we hit beginning of April next year, we're ready to go, ready to start. It'll be a phased implementation of all of these new plans. Not everything's going to start happening at the beginning of April, but what the next 6 months is about is getting the right people in place, the right training and development in place. It's planning with the team. It's that operational planning. What has to happen first? So, are we going to develop the knowledge hub on our website first? Or are we going to identify how we work in the community? So there'll be a phased approach to the things that we want to do. But so the next 6 months is about that. It's about making sure that we hit that ground running in April. And we will continue to consult with people as well. So as we develop those services, we want involvement. And that'll be the next stage of things, really. So we want to have a learning and skills programme. But what does that look like and how do we deliver it? And that will be when we come back out to people with sight loss, and we really understand it in more detail, really.
I think what I would say is that obviously we're in implementation now, we're also recovering from COVID. So
not literally,
obviously everyone's recovering from lockdowns, aren't they? And we've done some research recently through our welfare call service to try and gauge how people feel and how confident they are in terms of accessing group activity again, to access face-to-face support. It's incredibly varied out there. It is 50-50. It is, there's 50% of people that feel very, very nervous and are not ready to access face-to-face services or ready to access group activities. And there's 50% that are really eager to do that. What I would say is the new Galloway's hasn't forgotten about those people that access services pre-COVID. So the next stage for us is to have a look at how do we open our sites for those that that used to attend them. We won't be opening them full time because we can't do that at the moment because of capacity issues, but we certainly will be looking at an opportunity for people to access, you know, come and see our team, to welcome them back, to have a coffee with us, to perhaps see their friends that they would have normally seen in our sites. We said we would review that in September, and my team have done. So we'll be releasing some news about that soon as to how we can, particularly those that accessed our sites on a regular basis, how do we get them back, and how can we, certainly those that are very nervous, how can we encourage and support them to be able to come back and join that activity, because we know it's been hugely missed and it's had a huge impact on people not having those types of services. So yeah, lots going on really.